Misiniz?
Evet.
Anladım.
Şu anda başladık.
Assalamu alaikum ve rahmatullahi ve barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, welcome to the 22nd online talk series of Cross Cultural Communication Center. Today we are with you with a distinguished guest from Austria. Here is with you brother Sertac Odabas. So I'm just gonna quickly introduce him to you. By the way, the topic of today is awakening the truth. Basic Dawah training. So, brother Sertac, he is 29 years old. He lives in Germany. He studied mechanical engineering and he studied basic Aqidah and fiqh under the distinguished scholars in Austria. And also, he is working as an outreach specialist for the famous, well-known Dawah organization called Ayera. As you may know, just like 2 weeks ago, we have hosted a brother. His name was Bilal Tonyalı. He was the one who translated actually the book of Brother Hamza Zortet to Turkish. So we just talked with him about the book of Brother Hamza. So Brother Hamza also in the same organization with Brother Sertac. So they are in the same organization. They are basically working for the service of Allah, for the Dawah. Brother Sertac, welcome. How are you doing? How is everything in Austria?
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Alhamdulillah, everything is fine. As you know, we are in lockdown here, so alhamdulillah, we try to do the best with our time, and I'm very blessed, and I appreciate it to be here and to give you some aspects from our experience, which you can, inshallah, implement in your dawah in Turkey. Hello?
Can you hear me now, brother?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I think I was disconnected because of the internet problem. Yeah. Now
No
we
problem.
can. Now we can continue.
Inshallah.
So I was just asking you, how is the dawah going on during the Corona lockdown?
Yeah. So currently, what we do at Ayera, of course, we are not in the ability to make street dawah or other projects outside. So therefore, what we did, we, alhamdulillah, with the permission of Allah, we started a social media project which is called a viral awakening. So non-Muslims, they have the possibility to ask us questions about Islam, and alhamdulillah, all the outreach specialists basically take their time to answer these questions and also to give dawah on this social platform. So this is currently what we are doing, but of course we also develop personally, studying, researching, getting in touch with brothers like you, alhamdulillah. And yeah, this is the current situation.
MashaAllah. Inshallah, today, Brother Sertac is gonna talking us about the basic dawah training method, which they are using as Gorab method. And also, we want to host a colleague of brother in the same organization. I'm just like giving from the news from now. about related. The topic will be related to Islam, evolution, and Darwinism. Inshallah, we are requesting right now, Brother Sabur, after you. Inshallah,
Ah,
we're gonna
mashallah.
him as well. Inshallah. So let's start watching the quick introductory video about our organization. Then I'll leave the microphone to you, inshallah.
The magnificent city of Istanbul hosts more than 10 million foreign tourists every year. The city gives millions of non-Muslims a chance to meet with Turkish and Islamic culture for the first time in their lives. In 2010, a group of Turkish people came together and established the Center for Cross-Cultural Communication to offer the city's visitors a unique experience.
Our main mission here is to represent our culture and civilization in the best way possible. What we do is we bring together the volunteers and the tourists inside Suleymaniye Mosque, which is a great place to represent our culture because the whole building is yelling at you the art and the history, and we just explain their meanings.
Our volunteers interact with tourists inside Suleymaniye Mosque, giving them an opportunity to know more about Islam and the mosque. Later, we invite them to our historical meeting place, where we give presentations and provide visitors the chance to taste Turkish cuisine. Every year, we organise iftar events for non-Muslims during the holy month of Ramadan to show the spirit of sharing and charity. We also organise trainings and conferences for our volunteers so they can improve themselves and discover their potential.
Tourists have certain ideas about Islam and Muslim before coming here. After a small conversation, I'm happy to witness how their thoughts change. And at the same time, as well as volunteering here, we have a chance to improve our communication skills and foreign language, which is for me, English and Arabic.
I think it's really important for this sort of activity to happen for people all over the world and have a better image of Islam and Istanbul.
All right. Every single time we watch this video, we remember the old days where we were active in the field. Inshallah, may Allah make it as short as possible to go back to those days, inshallah. All right, brother. We are just with you. You can just jump into the topic and go ahead, inshallah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks for having me here, first of all. So, as Brother Enes mentioned, my name is Sertac Odabas. You might be thinking, why is this guy with Turkish name speaking English? So there are many factors to that, mainly because I was born and raised in Austria, and I was mainly in contact with non-Turkish friends. So, and I think for this kind of presentation, my Turkish is unfortunately not enough. Alhamdulillah. So I'm 29 years old. I work at IERA as an outreach specialist, and I mainly operate in the German-speaking countries such as Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. And today, inshallah, we will talk about awakening the truth. So this is basically our Dawah training course, which is an introduction to Dawah. We will talk about why is giving Dawah important. We will talk about the characteristics of a da'i, of someone who is calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we will also talk about the concept in the Islamic tradition called the fitrah and how to unlock the fitrah. And for this, we will talk about different keys. And most importantly, we will also talk about an approach which IERA established during their journey in the Dawah, which is called the GoRap method, right? Besides that, of course, we also have other presentations regarding atheism, Christianity, deism, and different kind of aspect which we basically deconstruct, and we try to reconstruct the Islamic narrative. Good. This presentation will take about approximately 50 minutes, inshallah, and afterwards we'll have a Q&A session where you can ask me questions, inshallah.
But
So first of all,
quickly,
yes?
can you open the reading mode, please, inshallah? It's gonna be
I'm
better.
sorry?
Can you open the reading mode for your presentation, reading mode?
Okay, just a moment. Okay. So is this okay?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, good. Perfect. So at the beginning, it will be a little bit interactive. So therefore, we will start with a question. The question is, why give dawah? So why it is important from your perspective, from your personal perspective? What do you think? Why is it important to give dawah, and especially from your context? So why is the importance of dawah relevant in our times? So this is my question to you, brothers and sisters. Any questions?
There's no question yet.
Okay. So when we talk about dawah, brothers and sisters, first of all, we need to reflect upon the aspect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in several places in the Quran commands us to give dawah. I mean, there are so many. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, for example, Surah An-Nahl, Udu'u ila sabili rabbik, call to the way of your Lord. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Fusilat, right? وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, and this is a rhetorical question. We need to reflect upon that. Allah mentions, and who is better in speech than the one who invites to Allah, does righteousness, and says, indeed, I am one of the Muslims. So when we think about and reflect about these verses, how often do you use your speech on a daily basis for calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And Allah also mentions to invite to Allah, right? So these are very important aspects. I mean, when we talk about dawah, let's imagine the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Let's imagine they didn't put the status of dawah very high priority. I mean, they could have said, okay, we get thousands of rewards if you pray in the Haram in Mecca for one prayer. We get thousands of rewards for praying one prayer in Medina. Let's settle here and do good deeds. But that was not the case, because we see Sahaba such as Bilal ibn Rabah, his grave is in Syria. We see Uqba ibn Amir, his grave is in Egypt. Or Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, how is it possible that his grave is in today's Turkey? Because these people, they prioritize the dawah. This message, Islam, we need to understand this. It's not just a conveyed message. It's a lived message. This message transformed these people, right? So from that perspective, the only thing we need to ask to ourselves, and I mean, we need also to think about that we live in a non-Muslim context, right? And if we believe that the Prophet ﷺ spoke the truth, and if we see that the Prophet ﷺ said that Islam will enter every house touched by night and day, every house, and Allah will not leave a house or except that Islam will enter it. Now, this is something, if we believe the Prophet ﷺ spoke haqq, and definitely he spoke haqq, the only question we should ask to ourselves is, what will be our contribution to this? What will be our contribution to this? And with this, brothers and sisters, we will speak today about do's and don'ts in the dawah, the importance of dawah, and also the characteristics of a da'i. So my goal for today is to give you a little bit of my humble experience, and of course, according to your context, because you know your context and your situation better than I do, or than we do, right? So you can implement the positive and the useful aspects in your dawah. So in the next slide, inshallah, I will ask you a question. Here we have a scenario, and I will read it to you. And this scenario goes like this. You are having lunch at university, and your non-Muslim fellow student asks you, I saw you praying earlier. Why do Muslims actually pray? You answer the question as best as you can and notice that your answer leads to follow-up questions. And why do you have to wash your feet in the sink for that? You could just pray all your prayers at once. Why do you need to take an extended lunch on Fridays? This goes on and on until you both have to go to class again, and all you did was answering his questions. So my question to you is, what is wrong with this scenario? I hope we will get some comments on that, inshallah.
By the way, sometimes the questions might come like a few seconds later. For the first one, someone said motivation from Quran and Hadith, and the other one said there are non-Muslims coming to us, which is like this scenario that you're talking now.
Yeah, non-Muslim, as mentioned in the text. Yeah. Okay, so there is a lack of Quran and Sunnah. Am I understanding correctly?
We didn't bring them close to the message. Someone just said we didn't bring them close to the message.
Okay, good, very good. Anything else?
Someone else says we should focus more on the meaning of prayer itself, not on the rituals, maybe.
Okay, good.
There is no end to answer these questions. Someone else just.
Okay, so basically it's a cycle of questions. Okay, good. Let's take one more.
The answer wasn't complete or comprehensive.
Okay, good, got it. Okay, so these are quite interesting comments. So from our experience, brothers and sisters, what we can say is, if you engage in questions like these, after 10, 20, 30 minutes explaining them and answering these questions, in many cases, a lot of people, what do they realize? Okay, we talked 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I answered the question, but what did I tell him about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The core message of Islam, what did I tell him about the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam? Because let's face it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't reveal the Quran so that we explain people why we wash our feet in the sink. That's not the core message. And we also need to realize the one who asks leads the conversation. And I want to put an axiom forward. An axiom, this is, in my opinion, one of the main pillars in the dawah. Don't tell people what they want to hear, but what they need to hear. to understand the answer to these questions will not lead him to Jannah, because these are not the core messages. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't reveal the Quran so that primarily, so that we explain people, for example, which came to my mind, to explain why Muslim women wear headscarf. That's important. But the main aspect is we need to give them the foundation. And the foundation is Allah. And if the foundation is established, then they will realize from an Islamic perspective, and then they will understand the answers to these questions holistically. So that we, as one of the brothers mentioned, so we don't end up in a cycle of questions and we are always in the defending position, right? And one aspect is also very important. One of the don'ts, let's say, right? Sometimes we try to rationalize everything. And this is also a lack of emotional intelligence. What do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, some of the tourists, they came to you in the Blue Mosque and asked you, why don't you Muslims eat pork? Because I love pork. Sometimes what we tend to do is we rationalize the answers. For example, what we say is, pigs, they are very dirty. And haven't you seen the survey which was done about pigs? They are basically swimming in their excrements. And I mean, what is the answer to that question? Why don't we eat pork? Because Allah said so. Because Allah said so, right? This is the foundation. So give them the foundation so that they can understand the answer to the question from the same lenses as you see it, right? Good. Let's come to the second scenario, inshallah. Your non-Muslim colleague at work, David, meets up with you and you get into a discussion over religion. David tells you the reason he does not believe in God anymore is because he was close to his mother, and when she died, his belief in God also died. After he finishes, you start giving him rational argument for God's existence, going through the argument from dependency, the argument from fine-tuning of the universe, and so on. So what is wrong with this scenario?
Someone says his problem is emotional, but what we gave him is rational.
Very good. Nice. Good answer.
Cultural Islamism. Someone just said.
Okay. Anything else?
Someone else. The explanation came from the wrong topic, irrelevant to the reason of tragedy of this man.
Good. Very good. So, very good answers and correct answers. Because what we see in this scenario, my dear brothers and sisters, is what we call the lack of emotional intelligence. Now, what is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is to correctly classify the feelings of the other person. Let's say to understand their language, right? And this is an emotional investment in people, right? And sometimes we are too analytical in the Dawah, Sometimes we don't have the balance between rational arguments and the emotional intelligence, right? Just let us reflect about one scenario in the life of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. There is a hadith which is classified as Hasan by some scholars in Abu Dawud, right? And in this, I love this example. I love this example. In this example, we have a guy called Rukana. Rukana was very well known in Mecca. He was a wrestler, right? He was basically the Khabib Nurmagomedov of his time. And one day the Prophet ﷺ saw him on the streets. And when Rukana realized him, he went to the other side because he didn't want to to deal with him, because the Prophet ﷺ at that time, he was basically the troublemaker according to them. So he wanted to avoid a conversation. But the Prophet ﷺ went to him and he stopped him. And after small talk, I'm paraphrasing here, the Prophet ﷺ told Rukana, let's take a step back. Let's take a step back. How do you connect? Let's put our situation now in the Prophet ﷺ situation. How do you connect with such a guy? What kind of approach do you take to convince this guy from Islam? You know what the Prophet ﷺ did? He said to him, I want to wrestle you. And Rukana, you want to wrestle me? Yes. But under the condition, if I win, you become Muslim. Now, if we think about that, right? For us, we don't see here a deductive argument. We don't see here an abductive argument. We also don't see any inductive argument. There is no rational argument to it. The premises do not add up to the conclusion. Right? So, in this situation, the Prophet ﷺ, he invested in people, emotional investment. So what ended up happening was, they stood up, started the wrestling, and the Prophet ﷺ beat him down. Rukana stood up, beginner luck. Second time, the Prophet ﷺ, before they could really start, the Prophet ﷺ wrestled him down. And the third time, he again wrestled him down. And what was the answer of Rukana? He said, by Allah, you must be a prophet of God. Subhanallah. This is emotional investment in people. This is understanding their language, right? And this is so profound, because sometimes we are too analytical in the dawah, right? So let's come to the last scenario. It's Discover Islam Week. You are at your Discover Islam Week stall table, handing out leaflets on Islam. A lady walks by and politely tells you that she is a Christian, that she believes in Jesus, and Jesus, is enough for her because he is the Son of God who died for her sins. You quickly reel off your Bible verses on how Jesus was not God and he was ignorant of the hour. So how is it possible he was God? You say to her with a smile on your face, how weak is your God that he died on a cross? Now, what is wrong with this scenario, brothers and sisters?
Someone just saying that by default you made her defensive without the stop.
Very good. What else?
Someone else says a rude and destroying attitude. Is another
Good.
one. You must not offend any gods, as mentioned in the Quran in the story of Musa alayhi salam.
Very good.
Another one says too sarcastic to make people have some sympathy.
Good. Nice. Very nice. So what we can see here, brothers and sisters, in this slide, we will touch upon the characteristics of a da'i, of someone who calls to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And one of the main important aspects is to be far-sighted, to have a correct mindset, not to have bad experience irritating us. For example, let's say you are in Istanbul and you're giving dawah to tourists. And then one tourist comes and let's say he slanders you or he curses at you. And then you see another person who, after 1 hour, who looks the same. Now, subconsciously, this is the wrong thing to do, to take the bad experience you had with this guy and project it to the next conversation. Therefore, we need to be far-sighted. I always take this example from the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he creates Adam alayhi salam. And when he created Adam alayhi salam, the angels came to him. The angels spoke to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when the angels spoke, they said, Ya Allah, why do you want to create something which will shed blood and bring mischief when we are praising you? Right? What was the answer of Allah? قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Truly, I know what you do not know. So every time if you have a conversation with a guy, you need to think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the whole picture of this person, and you just have one pixel. And to project from one pixel the whole person is, of course, something which we shouldn't do. The next thing, brothers and sisters, is sincerity. And this is very important. Dawah is not a self-profiling platform. As the Prophet ﷺ mentions, actions are judged by intentions. So we always need to try to seek and achieve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. The next point, which is very important in a micro dawah, which I call, which is basically the face-to-face dawah, right? Active listening versus passive listening. Active listening, we can define it as listening with the intention to understand. Not listening with the intention to argue, not listening with the intention to discuss, but listening with the intention to understand. Because what does this lead to? What does active listening lead to? It could lead, first of all, the person receives recognition. It can lead to a good flow of conversation. The person, and this is key, brothers, the person could become more receptive. And you, for you yourself, intrapersonal, you understand the person better and you can engage with her arguments in a better way. Right? And this is very important. So how can you show someone that you're active listening? For example, eye contact. For example, asking questions regarding the same topic. Affirmation, right? Approval of the things which are common from his belief and our belief. So these are all things which we need to implement in the dawah so that inshallah we can be also successful in the one-to-one face-to-face conversations, inshallah. Another example is empathy. Now, empathy is basically, how should I summarize it? To start to think from his perspective. Try to answer the question, why does he argue like that? Why does he think like that? Right? From his lenses. And from my personal humble experience, brothers and sisters, this is key in the dawah. This is key in the dawah. I mean, there are so many examples, right? From our dawah organization. By the way, I also founded a dawah organization in Austria, which is called Iman. We founded it in 2014. And we have so many experiences, subhanAllah. And also from the brothers at Aira. A brother told me, for example, a very profound story in the UK which happened. So these brothers, they had their regular dawah stall, right? And they went to the busy streets of UK and they basically handed out and distributed flyers, booklets, and so on about Islam. And one day, an Egyptian brother came to them. And this brother, he had this intrinsic motivation to participate in the dawah. But they quickly realized he had a broken English and he also didn't have the experience. But nevertheless, they took him with them and they basically put up their table, distributing, leading conversations, and so on. And from nowhere, a woman came to the table. She went to the Egyptian brother and spit on his face. Now, the reaction of this brother was, he took out a tissue and wiped out the spit on his face. And he took out a second tissue and gave it to this woman because when she spat, she had some spit on her own face, right? The woman left the table. The brothers came together. Oh, what happened? This never happened before. Did you say anything wrong? And so on, right? And I'm paraphrasing here. Now, a couple of weeks later, they had the same Dawah stall. And the same woman came to the table and she had a conversation with this Egyptian brother. And she embraced Islam. A couple of weeks after that, this brother married this sister. Subhanallah. Here we can see the empathy. Because this brother, without the language, without the experience, he acknowledged and internalized one thing, which is empathy. Because he realized, okay, the only source of information for Islam for this woman is the media. And as we know, the media is not our best friend, right? So with this small gesture, subhanallah, so many hasanat, ajr on the day of judgment, on his mizan. Let's imagine all the prayers of her, the hajj, zakat, sadaqah, dua, subhanallah, right? It's a gold mine of hasanat, brothers. And the last aspect, of course, know your limits. Dawah is not based on ignorance and emotion. We always need to strive and achieve knowledge and learn knowledge. Learning is a process, right? And it's important in the Dawah definitely to proclaim that which you firmly know about, right? Good. Let's go to the next step. I mean, we had now 3 scenarios of don'ts, and we explained them, how we can basically rethink these scenarios. The question now is, why do these scenarios happen? In my humble opinion, I think because sometimes we try to be too academic. Yes, academic is good for ourselves to defend Islam against polemicism. But when we talk about the majority of people, and also I guess you brothers and sisters, when you give Dawah in Istanbul, the majority of people, they don't have this academic insight into religion, right? So therefore, it is important, as Ali radiallahu anhu said, that we should speak to the people on the level of their understanding. This is very important, right? So therefore, it's important to come back to the basics. And what I mean by that, when we say dawah, which is call, right? And in the Islamic context, the call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A call to whom? It's important to know who Allah is. If you don't have this khushu', if you don't have this connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how do you want to connect other people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? So I won't go into depth in this, but it's important to know who Allah is, to know the aqidah. Where is Allah? In His dominion, right? In His lordship, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of heaven, of earth, of mankind, the creator of everything, the designer, the constructor, right? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ لَهُ الْمُلْكُ, right? And He also is the Lord of worship, in worship, that we exclude all false deities, and we include in our worship only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? As Allah says, as we know, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And I created jinn and mankind only to worship me, right? And of course, the other aspect when we talk about Tawheed, al-Asma wa Sifat, the most beautiful names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we have a basic foundation when it comes to this, and always rely to the basic foundation, who Allah is. Why do we worship? Why do we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Furthermore, Dawah is reconnecting the hearts back to Allah. Whose hearts? The second point which I'm mentioning here is, we need to know who the person is you're speaking to, right? What are his motives, right? Reasons for his rejection of God, or let's say rejection of the Islamic God, maybe when he is Christian, right? How it's important in a conversation to filter some information. For example, how did he come to this knowledge, right? And what exactly does he mean by that? So this is also very important to know who the person is. And of course, one important thing, brothers and sisters, in a face-to-face conversation, when it comes to dawah, we have one enemy, which is shaitan. who is basically giving this person waswas so that he doesn't accept what we say. But on the other hand, we have a very, very important companion. This companion is his fitra, his natural disposition that initially he knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. And therefore it is important to also know the truth within him, the fitra, that our goal as du'at is to awaken the truth within. Because he already believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Alastu bi rabbikum. And we said, Qalu bala shahidna. Yeah? So this is very important that we also realize in a conversation that we have a very important companion. Now, in this slide, we can see an image, and my question to you is, what is the difference between these two images?
Someone says the first one is dynamic, the second one is mechanic.
Very good. What else?
Someone else says first one can hear and can feel, but the second one cannot feel.
Perfect. Very good. Very good. So these are very good points.
Someone says free will and soul. First one has emotions and ideas. Another one says a human has freedom of choice, a robot doesn't.
Excellent. Excellent. So as you quickly recognized, if we see the human being, he has an aql, which is the intellect, right? He has a nafs, where the scholars say that the nafs is the soul and the body after birth, right? And then he has ruh, which is the soul, basically. He also has qalb and the fitra, the natural disposition. And as you brothers and sisters recognized, the human being, he has ability to contemplate, to think, to reflect, to feel. But on the other hand, a robot is programmed, you just have input, output, and you expect something to happen. And of course, a robot doesn't have thinking, doesn't have reflection, and of course, no feelings or emotions. But sometimes we are treating humans like we are treating robots. We think, oh, subhanallah, now I do understand the argument from dependency. This is the best argument. Now, what we are expecting is to give the person the input and expect the output should be shahada. So we are treating human beings as they are robots. And this is something very important, that we recognize that there are too many factors to one person to accept the truth or not. Too many aspects. And therefore, for a da'i, it's important to acknowledge this, right? And find ways how to connect better with this person, right? So the fitra relates specifically to dawah, i.e. to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any rational argument we give for God's existence or Islam are a means, not an end. The end goal is to awaken the truth from within them, which is the fitra. And when we come to the fitra, brothers and sisters, as you all know, Allah, the Prophet ﷺ mentions in Sahih Muslim, every child is born in a state of fitra. Then his parents make him a Jew, a Christian, a fire worshipper, and so on. So this is very, very profound, subhanAllah. So we can see, not like in the Christian tradition where we have the original sin. No, we have a fitra, which is the natural disposition that every human was born upon the fitra. And as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, through parenting and socializing, this fitra doesn't change, but it's, as Ibn Taymiyyah mentions, for example, this fitra gets clouded, right? And it sounds easy, but for a da'i, the main goal is to uncloud the fitra, so that this person sees the answers to his question regarding Islam as you see it, with the foundation of Tawheed. Okay? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions in chapter 30, so direct your face toward the religion, inclining the truth, adhere to the fitrah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon which He has created all people. Now, here, to summarize some points which we already mentioned, use the means and methods Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you to awaken the fitrah. Tell people not what they want to hear, but what they need to hear to be saved from Jahannam. Identify the right key that could awaken the fitrah. Now, what we mean by the right key is, as I mentioned earlier, there are many factors, many aspects to one person accepting the truth, right? And for us as du'at, it's important to identify the right key to unlock the fitrah so that he sees the fitrah clearer, right? For example, it might be rational arguments, yeah, or personal experiences, which can lead the fitrah to be unlocked. Also, spirituality. I mean, many of us, we started to practicing Islam, right? I started practicing Islam about 10 years ago, approximately, right? And what did we realize? We had an internal process. We started to see things differently from an Islamic, let's say, Tawheedi perspective, right? So this spirituality can lead to unlock the fitrah. Reflection as well, right? Reflection upon the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The character of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, right? So, I mean, this is something which is very profound, which we will also talk about, brothers and sisters. Never underestimate a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, because this might be the medicine which his heart or her heart needs in that situation, right? And of course, revelation, wahi, which is the Quran al-Kareem, and which is the most important, of course, because it includes all the other keys, right? Now, when we talk about, because the next step we will talk about the go-rep method. It is important when we get questions which are secondarily to Islam, such as we mentioned today, why do Muslims pray? Why Muslim women have to wear headscarf, right? Or why do Muslim men have to have a beard? Or why is there a difference between Sunni and Shia, for example? I mean, I'm just repeating the questions we get sometimes, right? I don't know your context. But the important thing is to initiate this to Tawheed, right? To take these questions, right? And bring them to Tawheed. And here we come to the GoRep approach. Now, GoRep is an acronym, which means for every word in the GoRep, there is a meaning, right? And we start with G. Let's think about the GoRep as a guideline in a conversation. A guideline so that you don't deviate in unnecessary polemical discussions, so that you can also always in the discussion come back and refer to the GoRep approach, so that you can effectively convey the message of Islam, right? Now, the initiation, how you can take these questions to Tawheed, in my personal opinion, this is the art in the Dawah, right? This is the art. And this is something which is, in my opinion, very individual. So everyone has to develop this for themselves, how they are confident with. But for example, let's take some examples. Someone comes to you and asks, why do, as we mentioned, why do Muslim women have to wear headscarves? Now, one way how you can initiate this is, for example, sir, that's a very interesting question. And I also reflected upon this question before I started practicing. But the main thing is, these women, they wear it because they believe in God. Now, for you to understand the question, the answer to this question is the foundation of Islam. So do you have some couple of minutes? And then you can ask the question, may I ask you, do you believe in God? Right? Now, of course, maybe he will say, no, I want a yes or no answer. Then you can politely refer and say, I'm sorry, but my religion doesn't represent yes or no answers. I also can't ask you what day is today, yes or no, or what's your name, yes or no. But if you want to have a discussion about the Muslim woman, we can talk about it. May I ask you, do you believe in God? Always bring it back to Tawheed, right? So this is something which is very individual, which you need to develop by yourself. But always stick to Tawheed. And when you give him the foundation, of course, it depends on who the person is. If the person is an, let's say, atheist, an irreligious person, of course, what do? You reconstruct the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the conversation. And when he is Christian, of course, it doesn't make sense to talk about the existence of God. What do? You basically use the position of Isa alayhi salam to deconstruct the Christian narrative of Isa alayhi salam and reconstruct the Islamic narrative of Isa alayhi salam, right? And then we can go to the oneness of God, which is very important if we talk about the concept of God in Islam. The next step should be revelation. Now, of course, if the person accepts that there is a God and this God is one, automatically, right, deism is fallacious. I'm also, by the way, working on a presentation on deism, which inshallah will be very interesting. Because if the person accepts that God created us, then he created us for a purpose. If I make the table, right, then there is a purpose behind it, right? Now, how does God convey his purpose, the purpose which he created? Through, as we Muslims say, revelation. Then you can go to the Quran, talk about the aspects of the Quran. And then, of course, the last point, the prophethood of the Prophet ﷺ. Because the question leads then, I mean, this is very automatically, as you can realize maybe. Because if there is a revelation, the next question is, who does convey us and explain us this revelation? We as Muslims say, these were prophets, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهِ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. And we have sent to every nation prophets and messengers who conveyed to their people, worship Allah and don't worship the false idols, the false gods, right? So we believe as Muslims from Adam alayhi salam till the Prophet alayhi salam, there were prophets and messengers, and they explained us the message, the revelation. And of course, if you see that the person acknowledges this and he appreciates and he says, yeah, I do believe it, please ask the question, what does hold you back from accepting Islam? Because you already believe in your heart what we as Muslims believe, right? And of course, if he has some things which are problematic for the person, you can address that, talk about that, you can exchange numbers, and so on, right? So this is the rational key. Now, the key of experience is also very important, brothers and sisters. What do I mean by that? So, I mean, this is a very good example, subhanAllah. You in Istanbul, alhamdulillah, you have the adhan 5 times a day, right? I mean, we see so many people online who embraced Islam just because of the adhan, because of this personal experience, right? And this personal experience can also be, for example, with Muslims themselves. I mean, we here in our context, we see so many new Muslims, reverted Muslims. If you ask them what was the reason you accepted Islam, many of them, they say, because of the brotherhood, because of the sisterhood, right? Because of the personal experience with Muslims, which they didn't have before. I mean, of course, this shouldn't be the main reason why they accepted Islam. The main reason should be Tawheed, but this is a means, basically, right? And positive and negative experiences as well. I mean, we see, for example, let's take a current example. A finance minister in Germany, because of this lockdown, He got very depressive and he killed himself. I mean, people are so depressed in these times. And some people, they are coming back to deen. So positive and negative aspects can lead the person to what? To reflect upon the purpose of life. Not about working from 9 to 5, mainly, right? Good. Next key, the key of reflection, right? The question of, the big questions of man and universe. And this is something which is also intrapersonal, right? To ask yourself, why are we here? Who are we? Where are we going? And what are we supposed to do? These existential questions, when people ask themselves, right? And they are truthful, right? This also can lead the fitra to be unlocked. Another key, spirituality. And this quote is very profound, subhanAllah. The key of spirituality unlocks the fitra by acknowledging that Islam frees us from the worship of others to the worship of the one deserving of worship, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because let's reflect upon it. If you accept Allah as your Lord, this is the moment where you are freed from the shackles of society, of shopping, of idolizing actors and soccer players, right? Because as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, subhanAllah, very profound, Allah puts forward an illustration. He says, is the situation, and I'm paraphrasing, is the situation of a person who has many lords same as the situation of one man who just has one lord? Of course not. Because you are directly connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sami'na wa ata'na, right? It would be, as Allah mentioned, a chaos if you had more than one God. And this is also something very interesting. A Pakistani poet called Muhammad Iqbal, he mentions a very, very profound statement. He says, a single prostration can free you from thousands of prostrations. Subhanallah. How many new Muslims we see who started praying without accepting Islam? They started already praying and they accepted Islam afterwards, right? And this, you had Dr. Steph Keris last week in this session, right? He had the same journey. He said, I was praying. I was just praying without being Muslim. I prayed and it felt very profound to me. It was so spiritual. I was so spiritually connected, right? And these are also things which are very important when we consider to unlock the fitrah. Now coming to the next key, this is the key of the character of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, indeed, in the Messenger of Allah, you have an excellent example for whoever has hope in Allah in the last day and remembers Allah often. I have only been sent to perfect good moral character. Brothers and sisters, never, ever underestimate a tradition of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Because he showed us that Islam is not an exclusively handed down religion, but a lived religion. And we always, the main literature of a da'i has to be, besides the Quran, of course, the prophetic tradition. We always need to think about what made the Prophet ﷺ so special, that we have Sahaba who transmitted to us that whenever we sat with him in a gathering, he made everyone feel the most special to him. Subhanallah. There is a very profound tradition as well, which we can see in Musnad Imam Ahmed, where a Sahabi transmits that if someone came to the Prophet ﷺ to accept Islam only for worldly reasons, the day did not pass until this person loved the Prophet ﷺ more than all his possessions. Subhanallah, what did make him so special? And this we can find, of course, in the prophetic tradition. and we think about that and we reflect upon that. And of course, definitely, this should not only be knowledge or information, it should transform us. Right? Good. And of course, the last key, the key of revelation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, the true believers are only those whose hearts tremble at the remembrance of Allah, whose faith increases when His revelations are recited to them, and who put their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is also, I mean, we have so many evidences of that. I have a personal experience with that. About 6 years ago, right? A sister who had never contact with a Muslim before had contact with one brother who had a Dawah stall here in Austria. And the brother explained her Islam, the basic pillars of Islam, right? And he handed her out a Quran, a copy of the Quran in the German language. And she appreciated that, and she went home and she put it in the bookshelf, she mentions. And she says, after 6 years, 5 to 6 years, she opened up the Quran, she read it for the first time, and she became Muslim. Subhanallah. And this is also something which we also do in the Dawah, brothers and sisters. If we see that a person believes in Allah and he believes almost everything you mentioned, but something is holding him or her back not to accept Islam, just give them the advice that they should read the Quran in their language. Subhanallah. Because the moment they are open the Quran, they are making dua to Allah. Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Guide us to the straight path. Subhanallah. At the moment they are reading Al-Fatiha, they're making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Quran includes all the other keys and is the main important source when it comes to the dawah. Good. Brothers and sisters, I hope you benefited from this, inshallah. And if you have any questions, we're good in time, 51 minutes, alhamdulillah. Then you can ask me now, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, brother, for this beneficial talk. We really benefited. And for me, it was really good in terms of how you addressed all these different aspects of dawah. Sometimes when we do in practice, we might forget about these different aspects. It's always important to keep them in mind and always important to try to address every individual according to their own situation. As you have mentioned, there's just not only one aspect. There's emotional aspect, there's the intelligent aspect, there's the human aspect, the feeling, upbringing of every individual's effects on their character. So we should also consider all of this. By the way, there was just one question we couldn't catch up with. Someone asked in the beginning, when you asked the motivation behind the dawah, why don't we use fitra? He said.
Good.
But during the talk, you already mentioned about this, so you already touched on this topic as well. The fitra aspect of dawah is also very important, as you and our brother has mentioned. And someone, I think she made a comment. She is joining us from YouTube. Accepting one sun save us from seeing every sunlight as a sun. So she shared like as an insight. When you accept one, it like frees us from all the shackles of accepting all the different deities, the deity of money, of materialism, the deity of everything that
this is also what Muhammad Iqbal, the Pakistani poet, basically mentions, right? And it's also very interesting. The French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he also has a similar, maybe he copied it from Muhammad Iqbal, Allahu Alam, but he has a similar statement where he says, where he says basically, man is free, but everywhere in chains. So don't think that you are free because you are a liberal or you can do whatever you want. No, you are chained in society, in idolizing actors. And from our Islamic perspective, we say the only way to basically break these chains and unlock these chains is when you accept your Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as your God.
Just one question from YouTube. Salwa asks, if someone is not interested in Islam, how can we open a talk? How can we start up a conversation?
Yeah, that's also a very important aspect. If someone is not really interested, how to make him more receptive, right? This is also something which is also very individual. But for example, if you really see that the person doesn't have any interest or he's just arguing, maybe sometimes it's better just to tell him, let's go have a drink. Really, let's eat something. To get in with him on a personal level, to get to know him on a personal level, right? And maybe in this gathering, drinking something with him, don't talk about Islam in any form. Just connect with him on a personal level, so that he basically will be more receptive to the message. If the situation is really like he is not receptive at all, right? It's sometimes also good to go that way, that you can say, you know, I have time. If you also have time, we can go drink something and get to know each other. Or if you have time the next day, we can drink something and get to know each other on a personal level. If you realize that the person is not receptive anymore and the conversation doesn't lead to any success.
Jazakallah khairan.
Well,
And
yeah.
there's another question. So you just mentioned about all these different aspects when we are giving dawah. So how should we determine which aspect we should focus on? Should it be like before the dawah, like, or should it be during the conversation?
This is very important in the beginning of the conversation, to ask specific questions, to filter some information from his answers so that you can identify the right key. This is very important. Sometimes, these are mistakes which I personally did back in the days, right? When you start a conversation, you're jumping in with the existence of God. You explain him, God must exist because A, B, C. You explained him for 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes he says, I do believe in God, I'm a Christian, right? So therefore it is very important at the beginning to clarify some positions and to ask specific questions. For example, how did you came to that conclusion? May I ask you, do you believe in God? What do you exactly mean by that? Do you have any proof for your assumption? Questions like this, which can lead him to give you some information. And the art is basically to filter the important information from his answer so that you can identify what's going on here. Let me give you just one example, a mistake from mine, right? I had a conversation in Vienna. We had a dawah table there with a physician. And this guy was about 30 years old, and we talked about God's existence and so on. And I was very focused on rational arguments. You know, there is the cosmological argument, and we have the fine-tuning of the universe, and chance doesn't exist. It's just something which we describe to things which we don't understand, and so on. And it was very counterproductive. But at the same time, after realizing that he didn't believe in God anymore after his mother died, as we mentioned in the scenario, then I was like, oh my God, what did I do? That was a big mistake, because his reason for not accepting God was not a rational one. It was an emotional one, right? So therefore, in the beginning of the question, to come to the question, in the beginning of the conversation, it's important to ask specific questions and then to filter some of the information which you need to identify the right key. Inshallah. Allahu Alam.
Right, Jazakallah khairan. Another question: while doing dawah and showing empathy to the person, is there a risk that we become like them in a way?
I'm sorry again?
While doing dawah and like doing empathy to the
Yes.
person that you are giving the dawah, is there any risk that we become like them? We start
Okay.
feeling like them.
Yeah. I mean, this risk, I would say, exists if the person or if the da'i, let's speak general, is not firm in his aqidah, in his Islam. Because if you go to give dawah, first of all, you need to be convinced of Islam in the first place, right? And one thing which I want not to be misunderstood, my dear brothers and sisters, if we talk about emotional intelligence and empathy, we need to have a balance between rational arguments and investment of emotional intelligence. Because Islam is not a religion of, if you strike me, as the Christians say in the New Testament, if you strike me on this cheek, I will hold you the other cheek. No, Islam is a religion of justice, right? So of course we don't basically respond to every question or allegation with empathy. Therefore, it should be a balance. This is very important because Islam is a religion of justice, not exclusively empathy and not exclusively rational arguments. Hope that answers the question.
Salah from YouTube says, if we already know each other, we work together, but if we never talk about the beliefs, so how can we do dawah in this situation? How can we start the dawah?
Okay, so basically from a non-dawah conversation, how can I lead to a dawah conversation?
I think in this situation, specifically like the colleagues in the work, let's say.
Okay, good. I mean, it depends. It's also a very individual question. So it depends on your relationship with the person. Do you know him for just one day, or do you know him for a couple of weeks and months? But what you can do, for example, and if you are Muslim, alhamdulillah, you also go to pray, right? Invite him for the next prayer. And if he doesn't want to pray, just come with me, stay outside, for example. I mean, there are different kind of aspects to it. What you also can do, you can start with general aspects and general topics, such as the purpose of life, right? Purpose of life. Why are we here? What are we doing here? And where we are going? I mean, you can see here in these times of lockdown, people are dying. I mean, there are hundreds of people dying in Austria, thousands of people. I mean, there are more than in the Netherlands. I talked with a brother earlier, a couple of days ago. Netherlands is a very small country. They have more than 1,500 people died. So what do you think happened with these people, right? What is the purpose of life? And what do you think are the answers to these big questions? And then you can present him the Islamic answers to these questions, which are obviously profound and very convincing. Hope that answers the question.
Someone said, can we just send someone to Quran or just give Quran without talking?
Absolutely. I would absolutely take a good translation of the Quran in the language, a good translation which you know of, which was recommended to you at least, and give it to him. Because you need to imagine, in that moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to him when he reads his words, as I mentioned, right? Because if he reads and it says there, ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, guide us to the straight path, he makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is something which we want. We want the non-Muslims to make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides them the straight path, right? Definitely. But of course, at the same time, be connected with them so that you can answer specific questions where we have, for example, khas verses which are khas, which are basically specific and which need explanation, right? So that you can be there as a person of contact and explain him the context of the verse and of course the reason and so on. Yeah.
All right, Jazakallah khair, brother. I think we can take the last question.
Mm-hmm.
Sister Eminegül, I think she's a volunteer in the mosque, asks, when we are in the mosque directly talking to the tourists, it is sometimes hard to ask them questions and get to know them there. So what can we do about this? How can we get to know them without scaring them in this situation?
I see. To be honest, this is something where I don't have any experience at all. I mean, we do have some open days for mosques here, but I don't want to give an answer which could be false, because you know your situation better, right? So therefore, I would pass this question. Hopefully, that's okay, because I don't know your context. But inshallah, I will get in touch with Brother Fatih for further projects, inshallah. And if I have a better insight into your work, then inshallah we can evaluate this, and I can give a more concrete answer, inshallah.
Also, the other thing is, in my experience in the mosque, you know, just without you asking them questions, they will start at a certain point, they'll start asking you the questions.
Okay.
So, like when you listen their questions and you have a lot of experience, field experience in the mosque, so after a certain period, when you got like all this experience, you would understand from this question.
I see.
So just try to make them ask without you asking them. So just make them ask. So if you do that, for example, what we say is, we just don't go to and tell them like, let's give you some information about Islam. We just tell them, dear visitors, welcome to the mosque. We are here as a volunteer. So in case if you need something, if you need to know about Islam, the Muslim practices, or anything else, feel free to contact us. So then we make them come and make them approach us. So this might be like an answer, inshallah.
Yeah, brother. To be honest, I mean, when Brother Fatih spoke to me about a little bit about your work there, mashallah, may Allah reward you. I mean, that's a gold mine, to be honest. I mean, he mentions you have 20 to 30,000 tourists per day. Allahu Akbar. I mean, this is a gold mine. This is something which we need to focus on, inshallah, if Allah allows us to continue some kind of cooperation. Inshallah, that will be very, very interesting. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullah khairan.
Hope to see you soon, inshallah, in Istanbul. I also heard that you are from Trabzon.
Inshallah.
Is it correct? Are you from Trabzon?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm from Trabzon. Just a moment. Let me show you this. Let me show you this.
We did not recognize that. Trabzonspor. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, you know, bize her yer Trabzon, so I can't do anything against it. So.
O zaman
inşallah.
İnşallah sizi burada görmek istiyoruz, İstanbul'da en yakın zamanda.
İnşallah.
May Allah give us the opportunity to meet, inshallah, in Istanbul, in Turkey, as soon as possible. May Allah may Allah make it shorter, as short as possible. This lifetime. May Allah provides us opportunity to go back and continue with this dawah, inshallah.
One last thing, which Brother Fatih told me, there is a feedback form, as far as I am informed. So, brothers and sisters, we would really appreciate it if you can fill in the feedback form, so that we can know how we can improve, and also the organization, Center for Cross-Cultural Communication, can evaluate and basically improve their services, inshallah. So the feedback form, Allahu Alam, I think Brother Fatih will send it to the people.
Yeah, it's already sent in the chat box. Just check the chat box and please fill it up, fill the poll.
Inshallah.
So it makes us improve ourselves. And the last thing, again, tomorrow we're going to be with you with the 23rd of our online talk series. The topic will be related to how to explain Mecca and Medina, like the holy sites in Dawah, inshallah, something to that. It will be an interesting topic, and brothers and sisters, hope you see you all, inshallah, for the tomorrow's program. Jazakallah khairan. Again, Brother Sertac, it was really a pleasure to meet with you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah
wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.